I can still go on. I can thank a phone call for messing up this video, guys. Okay? My name is Cowslip, said the other. And I don't want anything. I hear you come a long way. Perhaps we have, said Bigwig, and we know how to defend ourselves, too. I'm sure you do, said Cowslip, looking around at the mud-stained, bedraggled rabbits with an air of being too polite to comment. But it can be hard to defend oneself against the weather. And there's going to be rain, and I don't think your scrapes are finished. He looked at Bigwig as though waiting for him to ask another question. Bigwig seemed confused. Clearly, he could not make no more of the situation than Hazel. And there was silence except for the sound of rising wind. Above them, the branches of the oak tree began to creak and sway. Suddenly, Fiver came forward. We don't understand you, he says. It's best to say so and try to make things clear. Can we trust you? Can we trust you? Are there many other rabbits here? These are the things we want to know. Cowslip showed no more concern at Tiser's tense manner than he had for anything that had gone before. He drew a forepaw down the back of one ear and then replied, I think you're puzzling yourselves unnecessarily. But if you want answers to your questions, then I say yes. You can trust us. We don't want to drive you away. And there is a warning here. Not as big as one as we should like. Why should we want to hurt you? There's plenty of grass, surely. In spite of his strange, clouded manner, he spoke so reasonably that Hazel felt rather ashamed. We've been through a lot of danger, he says. Everything is new seems to danger to us. After all, you might be afraid it will come in and take your doughs or turn you out of your holes. Cowslip listened gravely, and then he answered, Well, as to the holes, that was something I thought of I might mention. These scrapes aren't very deep or comfortable, are they? And although you're facing out of the wind, you ought to know that this isn't the usual wind we get here. It's blowing up this rain from the south, and we usually have a west wind, and it'll go straight into those holes. There's plenty of empty barrels in our warren, and if you want to come across, you're welcome. And now, if you excuse me, I shan't stay any longer. I hate the rain. The warren is around the corner of the wood opposite. And he ran down the slope over the brook, and they watched him leap the bank to the further copse and disappear through the green bracken. The first scatters of rain began to fall, pattering into the oak leaves and prickling the bare skin inside their ears. Fine big fellow, wasn't he? Said Buckthorn. He doesn't look as though he had much to bother about living here. What do you think we should do, Hazel? Do you think? Asked Silver. It's true what he said, isn't it? These scrapes. Well, we can crouch in them out of the weather, but no more than that. As if we can't all get into one, we'll have to split up. We'll join them together, said Hazel. And while we're doing that, I'd like to talk about what he said. Fiber, Bigwig, Blackberry, can you come with me? The rest you split how you like. The new hole was short, narrow, rough. There was no room for 2 rabbits to pass. 4 were like beans in a pod. For the first time, Hazel began to realize how much they left behind. The holes in the tunnels of the old warren become smooth, reassuring, comfortable with use. There was no snags, rough corners. Every length smells of a rabbit, of that great indestructible flood of rabbitry in which each one is carried along, sure-footed and safe. The heavy work have all been done by countless generations of grandmothers and their mates. All the faults have been put right, and anything in use has proved value. The rain drains easily, and even the wind in midwinter cannot penetrate the deeper burrows. Not one of Hazel's rabbits has ever played any part in real digging. They had done that morning trifling, and all they had to show for it was a rough shelter with little comfort. There was nothing like bad weather to reveal the shortcomings of a dwelling, particularly when it was too small. You are, as they say, stuck with it and have the leisure to feel all its particular irritation and discomforts. Bigwig, with his usual brisk energy, set to work. Hazel, however, returned and sat passive at the lip of the hole, looking out at the silent, ripping veils of rain that drifted across the little valley between the two copses. Closer, before his nose, every blade of grass, every bracken frond was bent, dripping and glistening. The smell of last year's oak leaves filled the air. It had turned chilly. Across the field, the bloom of the cherry tree under which they sat that morning hung sudden and spoiled. While Hazel grazed, the wind slowly veered around him into the west as Cowslip said it would, and it brought rain driving into the mouth of the hole. He backed down and rejoined the others. The pattering and whispering of the rain sounded softly but distinctly outside. The woods were shut in under it and emptied and subdued. The insect life of the leaves and grass was still. The thrush would have been singing, but Hazel heard no thrush. He and his companions were a muddy handful of scratchers crouching in a narrow, drafty pit in a lonely country. There, they were not out of the weather. They were waiting uncomfortably for the weather to change. "Blackberry," said Hazel, "what do you think of our visitor, and how would you like to go to his warren?" "Well," replied Blackberry, "what I think is this. There's no way of finding out whether he can be trusted except to try it. He seems friendly, but then, if there's a lot of rabbits who are afraid of newcomers and want to deceive them, get them down a hole and attack them, they'd start, wouldn't they? By sending somebody who is plausible. They might want to kill us, but then again," he says, "there's plenty of grass, and as for turning them out or taking their doughs, they'll all come up to his size and wait. They have nothing to fear from a crowd like us. They must have seen us come. We're tired, and surely that the time to attack us. Or while we separated before we began digging, but they didn't. I reckon they're more than likely to be friendly than otherwise. There's only one thing that beats me. What do they stand to get from asking us to join their warren?" "Fools attract a live by being easy prey," said Bigwig, cleaning the mud up from under his whiskers and blowing through his long front teeth. "And we're fools until we've learned to live here. Safer to teach us, perhaps, I don't know. Give it up? But I'm not afraid to go and find out. If they do try any tricks, they'll find that I know a few as well. I wouldn't mind taking a chance to sleep somewhere more comfortably than this. We haven't slept since yesterday afternoon. Fiver, I think we ought to have nothing to do with that rabbit or his warren. We ought to leave this place at once. But what's good of talking? The cold and damp, Hazel felt impatient. He's always been accustomed to rely on Fiber, and now he really needed him. He was letting them down. Blackberry's reasoning has been first rate, and Bigwig had at last shown which way any sound-hearted rabbit would likely to lean. Apparently, the only contribution that Fiber could make is his beetle-spirited vaporing. He tried to remember that Fiber was undersized, and they had an anxious time and were all weary. At this moment, the soil at the far end of the burrow began to crumble inward and then fell away, and Silver's head and front paws appeared. "Here we are," said Silver cheerfully. "We've done what you wanted, Hazel. And Buckthorn's through the next door. But what I'd like to know is, how about, what's his name? Cowslip. And we're going to, is Warren or not? I'm surely we're not going to be sit cowering here in this place because we're frightened to go see him. Whatever you think of us." "I'll tell you," says Dandelion from over his shoulder. "If he's not dishonest, he'll know that we're afraid to come. And if he is, he'll think that we're suspicious, cowardly skulkers. And if we're going to live here in these fields, we ought to be on terms with his lot sooner or later. It goes against the grain to hang about and admit we dare not visit them." "I don't know how many of them they are," said Silver, "but we're quite a crowd. Anyway, I hate the idea of just keeping away. How long have rabbits been ill? Old Cowslip wasn't afraid to come in the middle of us, was he?" "Very well," says Hazel. "That's how I feel myself. I just want to know whether you did. Would you like Bigwig and me to go over there first, by ourselves, and report back?" "No," says Silver. "Let's all go. If we're going to go at all, for Frith's sake, let's do it as if though we weren't afraid. What do you say, Dandelion?" "I think you're right." "Then we will go now," says Hazel. "Get the others and follow me." Outside in the thickening light of the late afternoon, which rain trickled in his eyes and under his coat, he watched them as they joined him. Blackberry, alert and intelligent, looking first up and down the ditch before crossing it. Bigwig, cheerful at the prospect of action. The steady, reliable Silver. Dandelion, the dashing storyteller, so eager to be off that he jumped into the ditch and ran a little way into the field before stopping to wait for the rest. Buckthorn, perhaps the most sensible and staunch of them all. Pipkin looked around for Hazel and then came over to wait beside him. Acorn, Hawkbit, and Speedwell, decent enough rank and filers as long as they were not pushed beyond their limits. Last came Fiber, dejected and reluctant as a sparrow in the frost. As Hazel turned from the hole, the clouds in the west broke slightly, and there was a sudden dazzle of watery, pale gold light. "Oh, El Helera," thought Hazel, "these are rabbits we're going to meet." You know them as well as you know us. Let it be the right thing that I am doing. Well, brace up, Fiber, he said aloud. We're waiting for you and getting wetter every moment. A soaking bumblebee crawled over the twistle bloom and vibrated its wings for a few seconds, then flew away down the field. Hazel followed, leaving a dark track behind him over the silvered grass. There you go. This is the part 2 of episode 12. Are there anything you want to say? It's quite a mouthful.
It's very much like the Odyssey. Bed-ragged survivors, the enticing, well-fed stranger. Well, they're filthy, they're dirty, and their temporary structure looks even more temporary.
Mm-hmm.
And they're angry that they couldn't do better.
Well, bunch of bucks. What can you say?
Lazy ass.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's actually outside. It's
Yeah.
gonna rain. What do you mean? Is it the normal wind?
What do you think about cow patty? Cow slip.
He's up to something.
So, there's your part 1 and part 2 of episode 12 of Watership Down, read by me, Hua.